Welcome to Storytelling and Beyond, where emotions find a voice and stories touch the heart. The rain had started to fall just as the family gathered around the long dining table in the Dawson household. The aroma of roasted chicken and fresh bread filled the air, mingling with the laughter of a few guests who had joined to celebrate a quiet Sunday evening. Emily, the newlywed bride of the Dawson family, sat with a soft smile, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her water glass. Her heart thudded with anticipation, her news sitting like a fragile secret in her chest. Daniel, her husband, sat beside her, looking tired from work but glad to be home. Across the table was Margaret Dawson, Daniel's mother, a woman of strong opinions, sharp instincts, and a deep concern for the family's image. With silver hair neatly pinned and eyes that rarely missed a thing, Margaret was the unspoken matriarch whose word often went unchallenged. Emily cleared her throat gently. I have something to share, she said, her voice barely rising above the soft clinking of cutlery. Everyone turned to her, a hush falling over the table. Daniel looked sideways at her, brows lifting in mild curiosity. I'm pregnant, she said, smiling through the nervous flutter in her chest. For a moment, there was silence. A few surprised gasps from relatives, and then polite claps and smiles from the guests. Daniel's face showed a flicker of confusion, then a forced smile. But Margaret, her face hardened. She set her fork down carefully, folding her napkin with precision. How far along are you? Margaret asked, her tone calm but her eyes sharp. Emily hesitated. Almost 8 weeks. Margaret's smile never returned. Interesting, she said quietly. Because you and Daniel haven't been married that long. Her words hung in the air like a blade. Daniel blinked, his smile fading. Mom, what are you saying? Margaret didn't look at her son. Her eyes remained fixed on Emily, her voice still even. I'm saying the math doesn't add up. And before we celebrate something, we should be certain of what we're celebrating. Emily's face flushed. Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept her voice steady. I didn't want to say this in public, but we found out just after the wedding. I took a test and was waiting for the right moment. But of course, Margaret replied, her words coated in sarcasm. Convenient, isn't it? You waited just long enough to be sure. Or just long enough to make us believe it's Daniel's. Gasps echoed from around the table. Daniel shifted in his seat. Mom, stop it. I'm just asking questions, Margaret snapped. Questions any respectable family would ask. My son has a future, a name to protect. I won't let it be tied to something uncertain. Emily's eyes welled with tears. She stood slowly, placing a hand on her belly as if to shield the tiny life growing inside her. I love Daniel, she said, her voice cracking. I've never betrayed him. This child is his. But if love and trust are not enough for you, then I have nothing more to say. She turned and left the room, her footsteps muffled by the thick rug beneath. The rain outside poured harder, as if echoing her pain. Daniel remained seated, silent. Margaret picked up her glass of wine, as if the matter were closed. But the seed of something bigger had just been planted. Truth would come, whether they were ready or not. The morning after Emily's announcement, the Dawson home felt colder, not because of the lingering rain outside, but because of the tension that now hung heavily in every room. Margaret's expression hadn't softened overnight. If anything, her suspicions had only grown firmer. She moved through the house in silence, ignoring the curious glances from relatives who had stayed over. Daniel hadn't said much since dinner either, and that silence, louder than any argument, tore at Emily's spirit. By noon, Margaret summoned Emily to the sitting room. It was the room no one entered unless invited, with polished floors, antique decor, and a fireplace that hadn't been lit in years. Emily walked in with quiet grace, her palms damp, heart pounding. Margaret stood near the window, her back to Emily. Close the door, she said flatly. Emily obeyed. Margaret turned around slowly, arms crossed, her stare piercing. I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say. I gave you a chance to come clean last night, but you chose to humiliate yourself and this family. Emily's breath caught. I told the truth. Margaret walked toward her, stopping just inches away. No. You told a story. And maybe Daniel believes it because he's blinded by emotion, but I'm not that naive. Her voice was low, dangerous. You're hiding something. And until I know what that is, you're not welcome in this house. Emily's lips parted in disbelief. Are you asking me to leave? I'm not asking, Margaret replied. I'm protecting my son and my family name. This house has stood for generations on dignity and honor. I won't let it crumble under a lie. But I'm carrying his child, Emily said, a whisper now, as her voice cracked. Your grandchild. Margaret looked away. If that were true, I'd be the first to hold you. But until you can prove it, I won't be manipulated by tears and timing. The door creaked open. Daniel stepped in, having heard the last part. His eyes flicked between the two women. What's going on? Your wife, Margaret said, not missing a beat, is leaving until she can clear up the confusion she's brought into this house. Daniel looked at Emily, whose eyes were wide with shock and pain. Mom, she's pregnant. We should be supporting her. And if she's pregnant with your child, then that support should come after a DNA test. Not before. Margaret's voice was calm, resolute. Emily turned to Daniel, her voice barely holding. Is this what you want too? For me to leave? Daniel didn't answer right away. He was torn, the pressure of the moment heavy on his shoulders. Emily. I just think maybe a little time apart, until we figure things out, might help. Her breath left her like a punch to the chest. I see, she whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. She walked past him, slowly and quietly. No bags, no belongings, just the clothes on her back and the silent weight of betrayal. No one stopped her. Neighbors watched from their porches as Emily stepped out into the gray afternoon light, her head held high despite the storm inside her. Some whispered, others frowned, but she ignored them all. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she wouldn't return to a place that questioned her dignity. Behind her, Daniel stood by the window, unable to move. And Margaret sipped her tea with a quiet satisfaction, thinking she had protected her home. But the truth doesn't stay hidden forever. The bus stop bench was cold, and Emily could feel its chill seeping through her thin coat. Her hand rested gently on her belly, rubbing small circles as if comforting not just the child within, but herself. The last 24 hours had unraveled her life. A few passers-by gave her a second glance, wet hair, puffy eyes, no luggage. But no one stopped. She pulled her phone out and stared at the screen. No calls. No texts from Daniel. A silent confirmation that she was truly on her own. But there was one person who still lived in the same city, her childhood friend, Rachel. It had been years since they'd last spoken, but Emily had no choice. She dialed. Hello? Rachel's voice brought back a flood of memories. Emily exhaled, her voice trembling. Rach, it's me. Emily. A pause. Then warmth. Emily? Oh my God, it's been forever. Are you okay? The pause on Emily's end was enough. Rachel's voice softened. Where are you? Come to me. Right now. Later that evening, Rachel opened her small apartment door to find Emily standing there, drenched and pale. Without a word, she pulled her into a tight hug. The apartment smelled like cinnamon and safety. It wasn't much, just 2 small rooms and an old couch, but to Emily, it was a palace. That night, wrapped in borrowed pajamas and holding a mug of hot tea, Emily finally told Rachel everything. From the dinner, to Margaret's accusations, to Daniel's silence. Rachel listened with wide eyes and clenched fists. I swear I'll never understand how people can be so cruel when you're at your most vulnerable, she said, handing Emily a tissue. You don't deserve any of this. And you're not alone. Not anymore. Over the next few weeks, Emily began to adjust to her new life. Rachel helped her find a part-time job at a nearby bookstore. The pay wasn't much, but the owner was kind and allowed her to sit when she needed to rest. The gentle hum of flipping pages and the smell of old books gave her a sense of calm. At night, she and Rachel would cook simple meals, laugh at old memories, and talk about baby names. Slowly, the fear began to fade, replaced by a quiet strength that Emily hadn't realized she carried. Still, the weight of Daniel's silence was ever present. She hadn't heard from him once. No calls, no messages, not even to ask if she was okay. The pain of his absence hurt more than Margaret's words. He had promised to protect her, to stand beside her. But in her moment of deepest need, he had stood still. But Emily no longer let that pain define her. She was building something new, something honest, small, and strong. Each morning, she'd place her hand on her growing belly and whisper, "You are loved. No matter what they say." One evening, Rachel came home with wide eyes and a folded paper in her hand. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "Your name's been going around, but not how you think." Emily looked up, confused. Rachel unfolded the paper. "Margaret's neighbor? The one who's always poking around with gossip? She told people you were cheating. But someone's questioning it. Someone close to them is asking for the truth." Emily's heart skipped. "Who?" Rachel hesitated. "Your uncle-in-law. Henry, I think?" "He said, something doesn't sit right. And he's going to prove it." Emily blinked, unsure whether to hope. But for the first time in weeks, a tiny flicker of light broke through the fog. Truth, it seemed, was finally on its way. The early spring sun filtered through the bookstore windows as Emily dusted the shelves with gentle care. Her belly had grown noticeably now, and customers would often smile kindly or ask how far along she was. It was a different world here, one of warmth and humanity, unlike the judgment and suspicion she had left behind. Emily had learned to cherish the quiet moments, folding baby clothes Rachel found at thrift stores, reading stories aloud to her growing child, sipping tea while watching the rain. But beneath the peace, her heart still carried the bruises of abandonment, especially Daniel's silence. Then, one slow Tuesday afternoon, as she arranged a display of parenting books, she heard the soft chime of the door. She turned casually, expecting a regular customer. Instead, she froze. There, standing awkwardly in the doorway, was Henry Dawson, Daniel's uncle. He looked older than she remembered, slightly hunched, with gentle eyes and a cautious smile. "Emily," he said softly, tipping his cap. "Do you mind if I talk to you for a moment?" She nodded, hesitantly leading him to the quiet corner near the window. He sat across from her, taking in her appearance with a long sigh. "You look stronger," he said. "Tired, but strong." Emily smiled faintly. "I've had to be." Henry leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly. "I owe you an apology. For everything." She tilted her head, confused. "I should have spoken up the night Margaret attacked you. But I was afraid. Margaret has always ruled that house like a fortress, and no one dares challenge her. But that night, something didn't sit right with me. And it hasn't since." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope. "I did a little digging." Emily hesitated, then took it. Inside were 2 photos, grainy but clear. One was of Daniel with Emily at a wedding months before their own. The other, a printout from the hospital's prenatal records Henry had requested as Daniel's uncle, confirming the due date aligned perfectly with their wedding timeline. "I took this to Daniel," Henry said. "He didn't believe me at first. But when I showed him the timeline, the truth hit him hard. I've never seen him cry like that." Emily felt her throat tighten. "He never reached out. He didn't know how. He thought he'd lost you. That you would never forgive him." Tears welled in her eyes. He stood there, and let her send me away. "I know," Henry said gently. "He's broken by that choice. But he wants to make it right. He asked me to find you. To ask if you'd speak with him. Just once." Emily looked down at her belly, her hand instinctively covering it. She had built so much strength in these past weeks, but this moment, this decision, reopened wounds she had just begun to heal. Does she know? She asked quietly. Margaret? Henry gave a dry chuckle. She knows now. And she's not happy. But Daniel, he finally stood up to her. Emily stared out the window, the sunlight dancing on the glass. After all the pain, all the silence, was there still a place for forgiveness? Henry stood slowly. I'll leave you to think. But know this, he hasn't stopped loving you. Not for a second. As he walked out, Emily remained in the corner, the envelope clutched in her hands. The truth had arrived quiet, unexpected, and late. But it was here. Now the choice was hers. The evening was calm, the soft breeze swaying the curtains in Rachel's small apartment. Emily sat by the window, holding the now familiar envelope from Henry in her lap. She had spent the last 2 days wrestling with a storm of emotions, hurt, betrayal, uncertainty, but also a quiet tug of hope. Rachel came over and sat beside her. You don't have to decide today, she said gently. Emily shook her head. I'm not doing it for him. I'm doing it for me. For this child. They deserve the truth, and maybe closure. The next morning, Emily stood outside the Dawson family home. It looked just the same, immense, proud, still wrapped in its cold dignity. But something felt different. This time, she wasn't here to beg or explain. She was here because she deserved to be. The door opened before she could knock. Daniel stood there, eyes red, thinner than she remembered, and a nervousness she hadn't seen in him before. For a long moment, they just stared. I didn't think you'd come, he said, voice breaking. I almost didn't, she replied softly. He stepped aside, allowing her in. The house was quiet, heavy with the absence of confrontation. Margaret wasn't there. Emily noticed a packed suitcase near the staircase. She left this morning, Daniel said quietly, following her gaze. She couldn't accept being wrong, so she left. Emily turned to him. And you? He sighed. I was wrong too. I let her words become louder than my heart. I didn't trust you when it mattered most. I let fear decide for me. He stepped closer, cautiously. But not a day went by that I didn't miss you. Or regret everything. Tears welled in her eyes. I needed you to fight for me. I know, he whispered. I'm here now. If you'll let me be. I want to raise this child together. I want to fix what I broke. There was a long silence before Emily slowly reached for his hand. We'll have to rebuild from the ground up. But if we do, it has to be honest. Always. Daniel nodded, emotion tightening his face. Always. As they sat on the couch, Daniel resting his hand over hers on her belly, something shifted. Not everything was healed, not all wounds were gone, but the first stitch had been made. Weeks later, the Dawson home saw laughter again. Rachel remained part of the family, visiting often. And Margaret, though distant, eventually sent a letter, one that held no apology, but a simple acknowledgement, I was wrong. That was enough for Emily. The day their baby girl was born, Daniel wept openly. And as he cradled his daughter, he whispered to Emily, "Thank you for giving me a second chance. I'll never waste it." The story of Emily wasn't one of just pain, it was one of strength, of truth, and of love that chose healing over pride. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Storytelling and Beyond. We bring you powerful stories of human resilience and hope. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and believe in the power of second chances.